In this video, we're going to learn about the anatomy and physiology of the brain. So let's look at the structures of the brain. Now the brain is divided into three regions: the forebrain, the midbrain, and the hindbrain. The midbrain and the hindbrain together are known as the brain stem. So regions of the brain stem include the medulla oblongata, the pons, and the midbrain. Also a part of the hindbrain is the cerebellum. The cerebellum is responsible for coordinating our body movements. The cerebrum, the thalamus, and the hypothalamus all make up the forebrain. So the brain stem is made up of two sections, the hindbrain and the midbrain. This serves as a sensory filter, selecting which information reaches our higher brain centers and of which we'll have conscious knowledge of. The cerebellum which is a part of the hindbrain, is the planning center for the body's movements. So things like walking or riding a bike or moving the body, it's related to the functioning of the cerebellum. The pons is a structure of the hindbrain which is responsible for the control of the respiratory system. It's the pons which causes us to breathe more deeply when performing exercise, and also what causes us to yawn. The medulla oblongata is responsible for controlling many of the involuntary activities associated with eating. The forebrain contains the most sophisticated integrating centers in the brain: the thalamus, the hypothalamus, and the cerebrum. The thalamus contains most of the cell bodies that relay information to the cerebrum, whereas the hypothalamus we discussed quite a bit in response to the endocrine system. The hypothalamus controls many of the regulatory functions of the body. The cerebrum is the largest and most sophisticated part of our brain. It consists of right and left cerebral hemispheres. When we look at the cerebrum, the outer, wrinkly portion of the cerebral hemispheres is known as the cerebral cortex. It is a highly folded layer of gray matter forming the surface of the cerebrum. The cerebral cortex helps produce our most distinctive human traits, especially when it comes to problem solving and complex thought. The cerebral cortex is the site of the most complex mental processing. Now, the right and left cerebral hemispheres are specialized for different mental tasks. Now, it's definitely not as simple as logical versus artistic or creative versus mathematical. None of those simplifications really encompass what's actually happening in the brain. But we do have different regions of the brain that control different structures. In fact, each hemisphere of the cerebrum has 4 lobes. This includes a frontal lobe, a temporal lobe, a parietal lobe, and an occipital lobe. As you can see on this diagram, different regions and different brain processes do seem somewhat tied to different lobes of the brain. Lateralization is the name of the process in which areas of the two hemispheres become specialized for different functions. Now, evidence from brain surgery patients indicate that patterns of lateralization are not immovable. And that certain tasks or things that may have been mapped to one portion of the brain, it's possible that they could be relearned or moved to other regions of the brain as well. Here we see an image of a patient after a brain surgery which removed one of their two cerebral hemispheres. Now, this patient is still alive, and in fact, their quality of life is better now after the surgery than it had been previously. This individual likely had very severe epilepsy, and there was some sort of electrical short-circuiting happening between the two cerebral hemispheres. And so now, even though this individual will need to relearn some things and will have some permanent effects from the surgery, again, their overall quality of life is greatly improved compared to what it was before the surgery. In fact, a lot of what we've learned about the brain comes from cases where individuals have had damage to specific regions of the brain, or surgeries which have altered or removed certain portions of the brain. In 1848, a railroad accident to a man named Phineas Gage propelled a 3-foot-long spike through Phineas Gage's head. Although he walked away from the accident, his family noticed significant changes in his personality following the accident. While usually being a pretty friendly guy, after the accident he became very aggressive, very confrontational. In fact, even if anyone would make eye contact with him, it would cause these aggressive actions on his part. Subsequent studies on his preserved skull have helped scientists to understand the functioning of the frontal lobe of the brain and its link to different personality traits. This concludes our discussion of the structure of the brain and its components and functions. In the next video, we're going to talk about how our brain receives information about our surroundings. We're going to learn about sensory transduction and a few of our different senses. See you in the next video.